we're good, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good. Yeah, thanks for doing this, spending the time.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I was just kind of in a rush this morning. I just got back from my jiu-jitsu class, and I was like, taking showers. I was sweating. I'm still hot.
Are you on the Big Island? Is that where you're based? Or
Yeah, I'm in Hilo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go to the Ukwanchin, or not Ukwanchin, the
Yep.
Reimagining Homelands?
Yeah, have you seen that?
Night? Yeah. Yeah, I saw it when they did it here.
Are they doing it on Oahu again?
The first time I saw it here.
Okay. But they're not doing a repeat performance again?
I don't know. I haven't heard about a repeat performance.
Yeah, I was so impressed. It was like, yeah, way better than I ever thought it would be, you know? I mean, they could take that show. I talked to Norman a little bit after the show. I was like, yeah, you folks can take this to like around the world, you know? Yeah. I mean, it has that, everybody can relate to that, to the performance. Yeah, it was so good. Yeah. So I hope they do that.
I hope so too, yeah.
Yeah, because I know he said they're planning to take it to Okinawa. I guess that's their goal.
Oh, wow. That'd be great.
Yeah, so that's I guess that's on the agenda. But yeah, that performance was so great. I wish more people could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're from Kauai, right?
Yes. Okay. Born and raised on Kauai.
Okay, but you didn't want to go back.
I do want to go back.
Oh, you do?
Honolulu is too big for me. I think I need something slower pace.
Yeah.
Eventually, I do want to end up going back home.
Mm-hmm. Where would you live?
I don't know. That's a thought for down the road. But all my parents, my aunties, uncles, cousins are all still on Kauai.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because my uncle passed away a couple years ago, but he was 103-year-old taro farmer.
Wow.
So he was in Hanalei. So we used to go visit him during the summers and help out a little bit, you know, but we were just little kids. So we're just playing around in the mud and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was so good. I have such good memories about that time. Because you could catch oopu in the stream, and there were prawns in his stream. He used to live right next to the ocean, right on the bay, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was beautiful area.
Yeah, very nice area.
Yeah. Except that traffic, though.
I know.
Driving through Kapa'a is like horrible.
Now especially, it's gotten so bad.
Yeah, so bad. Yeah, I'm from Oahu too, actually, but I could never go back to Oahu. It's too crazy.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. Hilo's so different.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling Eric and Norman that you can tell when you're in a small town, right? When people actually like let you turn when you're driving. Mm-hmm. You know, they say, "Oh, go ahead." You know, but on Oahu, you have to like force your way.
I know. Driving here stresses me out so much.
Yeah. But I guess it's not as bad as like LA. I mean, when I drive in LA, then that's like that really stresses me out.
I don't think I could ever drive in LA. That's too much for me.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, we kind of talked about, you know, maybe you could introduce yourself and I guess your background and your ancestors' background, and, you know, we can kind of go from there, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aloha, haisai. I'm Micah Mizukami. Again, born and raised on the island of Kauai. 5th generation Japanese on Kauai. On my mom's side, my mom is half Okinawan, half Japanese. But she was 4th generation, so I'm 5th generation on that side. And then my dad, my last name Mizukami is Japanese name. From Kumamoto, southern Japan. But talking about my Okinawan side, so my grandma came to Kauai from Maui. She was born and raised on Maui. But her parents came from Nakagusuku, Okinawa, from this tiny village called Ishado, Nakagusuku. And my great-grandfather on my Okinawan side was a teacher in Nakagusuku, but I guess he couldn't make money as a teacher, so he came to Hawaii in 1905.
Oh, wow. Ishado. So where is Ishado?
Have you been to Nakagusuku?
I think I've been maybe through it. I don't really know.
It's this really tiny kind of really small, like, I guess you think of like the Ahupua'a system and how it's like going from the mountain to the sea. It's like on that main highway that runs through Nakagusuku, it goes from like there all the way. It's like a narrow stretch towards the ocean. But I was just there this summer trying to reconnect with some relatives I found out were still there, like my grandma's first cousin. But I learned on my trip there that Ishado is the oldest part of Nakagusuku. And it used to be higher up the mountain, right next to the remains of Nakagusuku Castle. But it was moved down. I don't know when, but that's kind of the history of Nakagusuku.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been to Okinawa just twice, and my Okinawan geography and just a map in my mind is so bad.
I know, me too.
Yeah, but I'm hoping I can maybe do a family trip at the next Taikai. I've never been to the Taikai, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I really want to go to the next one.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe you can talk about, you said that when you were growing up, you didn't really have that Okinawan connection, So when did that, you said in college, right? I think at Willamette.
Yeah.
That's when you kind of reconnected with the Okinawan side. So how did that all come about?
Yeah, it was interesting. So like I said, my Okinawan grandma moved to Kauai from Maui. She was the youngest daughter of 8 siblings. I think there was one younger brother below her. So she was kind of at the very end of the the siblings and grew up, I guess, much more Americanized. So when she moved away from all her siblings on Maui, she didn't really bring or wasn't really exposed to Okinawan things as well. So yeah, I never really ate Okinawan food growing up, did anything culturally Okinawan. But I started to get super into like trying to learn more about my Japanese side because like my grandparents didn't speak any Japanese. So I went to Willamette in Salem, Oregon to major in Japanese. But it was weird, like those freshman kind of fairs where all the different clubs are kind of like trying to recruit new students. So there was that when I got to Willamette, and there was this community auntie, I guess, who was from Okinawa, and she wanted to teach students Sanshin or Okinawan Kobudo. So I was like, oh, this is super interesting. I don't know anything about my Okinawan side, and here's an opportunity to learn about Okinawa through music. I used to play piano in high school and middle school. So I was like, okay, I can continue the music thing and learn about my heritage. So I started learning Sanshin in Salem, Oregon, of all places, with this random auntie who just wanted to share the Okinawan culture with students. And it wasn't Uta Sanshin like how like Norman Shinshi and stuff does. She was just someone from Okinawa who knew how to play, and so I learned how to read the notes and play. I don't know how to sing with a sanshin though.
Yeah. You're probably a lot better than I am. I told myself I'm going to dedicate myself at some point and finally be able to learn how to sing and play properly.
I haven't really played in a really long time though. So,
so that woman that taught you, she was just associated with the university somehow, and she just decided to.
No, she wasn't. She just lived nearby, and I guess she just really wanted to share Okinawan culture with students, which was really cool. So I think that was the first year she went, and then we had a really small Sanshin club on campus. There were about 5-6 of us, and I ended up doing that for my entire time at Willamette from my freshman year through my senior year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
So what other, I guess, Okinawan cultural things did she introduce to you?
I don't know if it's not really cultural. It was like a joke she made. because I told her my Okinawan side is Higa, and I think her maiden name was Oshiro. So she made a joke like, "Oh, we say in Okinawa, if you throw a rock in a crowd, it's probably going to hit someone named Higa or Oshiro because those are really common names."
So what generation was she?
I think she was from Okinawa. English was definitely her second language, but I think she was working at like a Japanese school or is currently working at a Japanese language school there. I don't know, or I don't remember what circumstances brought her to Salem, Oregon, of all places. I actually met up with her for the first time in like 10 years last year when I was visiting Oregon. She moved out of Salem, so she's closer to Portland now, but doing really well. But unfortunately, she's not continuing the Sanchin club at Willamette because she's not there anymore. Yeah, but yeah, just this random auntie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember going to Willamette. I went to Pacific University.
Oh, so. Okay. That was also one of my choices.
So I was at Pacific, and I played tennis at Pacific. So we would go to Willamette and Lewis and Clark and Linfield, and all those small schools, just to visit and play.
Yeah.
Willamette had a super nice campus. I was really impressed.
Yeah, but Salem doesn't have anything.
There's nothing in Salem. Yeah. I don't really know Salem, but but Portland. We always visit Portland.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, Portland has so many restaurants and so many cultural things. So. Yeah. So I guess from that point, how did that spark, like, ignite your Okinawan journey?
Yeah, it was. I think it's interesting that it started in Salem, Oregon, of all places. So that was kind of one of the starts, just having an opportunity to learn about Okinawan music through that. But then the other part was that, so Willamette is super small school, like, I think maybe 1,200 undergrads total-ish. So my class was about 400. Each class is about 400 students, right? And then at the time on campus, there was the Tokyo International University of America, which would bring over about, I'd say on average, 120-ish students from primarily Japan, but also China, Korea, sometimes Mongolia, Southeast Asia, but predominantly from Japan. And then they would see like the local Hawaiʻi kids or the Asian American kids, and they would always ask us like, "Oh, are you Japanese?" And you know how it is in Hawaii, like you just say what you are by your ethnicity. So like, "Oh, I'm Okinawan Japanese" or whatever. So we would say that to them, and then they'd be like, "Oh, so your parents are from Japan?" And we'd be like, "No." And then they'd be like, "So your grandparents are from Japan?" And then again, "No." And then they just didn't understand how we could be Japanese, like without a parent or grandparent being from Japan. So it's like we had to draw I would draw like a full family tree, explain like, this is how I am here today as a Japanese Okinawan American. And then when I would say I'm Okinawan Japanese, they would say Okinawa is part of Japan. It's the same thing. And I don't know how many times I got told that. And that was kind of like I was like, how come all these people from Japan are telling me Okinawan and Japanese are not separate things? How come they're all saying it's the same thing? And so that was like throughout my freshman year, throughout like beginnings of my sophomore year. In my sophomore year, there was one student from Okinawa actually in that group. So I would have like discussions with her, and she would say things like, "Oh, my passport is Japanese, but I feel like I'm culturally different from Japanese people." So I was like, "Oh, okay, that's really interesting, because what you're telling me is kind of different from what literally everyone else from Japan is saying." And then I started doing a lot more dives into like Okinawan history and stuff through my coursework. Like I had to take a lot of Asian history courses. So I would write my papers about Okinawa instead, because I got really interested in that, and kind of where did Okinawa and Japanese kind of become different ethnicities, especially in Hawaii? And why is the situation different in Japan? And as part of that, Willamette had this scholarship program or a research grant for students to do independent summer research. And my advisor, who is my Japanese professor, encouraged me to apply. So I wanted to do interviews with people in Okinawa, like local people, about what they think being Okinawa meant. And as preparation for that, in my spring semester of my sophomore year, I took an oral history course. It was an upper division history class, like a seminar. And I had to get an exemption to get into the class because I was still an underclassman. But that was kind of my training for the grant. And I went to Okinawa and I interviewed about 10 people. This is 2011 when I went to Okinawa. My first time in Japan, first time in Okinawa. I'm there by myself.
But your Nihongo was good.
It was okay. I was in fourth year Japanese in my sophomore year, but it was not good. When I got to Okinawa, I remember going to the supermarket, and then looking back on it now, I know the lady at the register was asking me if I wanted a plastic bag, but I had no idea what she said. Like, it was just too fast, just like kind of like the Peanuts, like Charlie Brown, adults talking. Like, I had no idea what she was saying. And I just kind of like nodded, just like pretending like I knew what she was saying. But yeah, I look back on those interviews now and I'm like, oh, my language skills were not good enough for the things I wanted to ask. But I like, looking back on it too, I'm like really impressed that I was able to do that. So yeah, that was kind of like my undergraduate experience. So that was in August, actually, that I went, and I was going to be studying abroad my junior year for the whole year at Tokyo International University, their campus in Saitama Prefecture. When I was in Okinawa in August, everyone was telling me, you need to come back in October for Taikai. And I was like, what's Taikai? So I ended up flying back only for the weekend during Taikai because I had class. But I got to reunite with some of the people I interviewed who I'm still in contact with today. And that was the one and only time I went to Taikai. But it was really interesting seeing like you could tell like, oh, those people are all from Hawaii. Those people are from wherever. And then my senior thesis too, when I graduated, was about Taikai and transnational identity. But yeah, it's kind of full circle because right now I'm also working on a paper for my PhD, which I'm doing on the side, on Taikai and kind of the linguistic landscape and multilingualism in Okinawa during Taikai.
Oh, wow. So when you did interview those people in Okinawa, like you said, whether they identified as Japanese or Okinawan, I guess, what were some of the responses?
Yeah, I got both ends of the spectrum. Some of the people I interviewed were like, oh, we're Japanese. We have a Japanese passport. We're Japanese. We're part of Japan. Okinawa is a little bit different, but still part of Japan kind of answer. And then on the other extreme, I had someone who was with I think it's Axels. Sorry, I don't know the full acronym. But he was like, I'm Luchuan. I prefer to identify as Luchuan because he wanted to restore the kingdom kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I had people kind of more down the middle where it's like, I'm Okinawan, my passport is Japanese, but my culture is different from the rest of Japan, kind of like what my friend Willamette was saying. So I really had everything.
But it's interesting. I mean, considering that you didn't have any, I guess, Okinawan culture or really exposure when you were growing up, when you went to Willamette, you did identify, you said you're Okinawan Japanese, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus just Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you separate it?
Because that's what I heard growing up. My friends who were mixed Okinawan Japanese would identify as Okinawan Japanese. I don't know how I knew my grandma was Okinawan, but I did. But yeah, I think when I was confronted with that question of Okinawans and Japanese are the same at Willamette, I didn't know why we distinguished them in Hawaii. And that's kind of why a lot of my research ended up being about Okinawa as this kind of self-discovery kind of personal research.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's interesting. Because for the longest time, my parents would say that we're Japanese, you know, and maybe only in the last, I don't know, only the last 5 years, maybe have they reconciled that they're Okinawan, you know, because they're 100% Okinawan, you know.
Oh.
Yeah. So I guess once I started going down this path and started talking to them about various indigenous things, yeah, I think something switched in their mind too. So now they'll say they're Okinawan. Yeah, it's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, my mom too, my auntie, her sister, have told me in the past couple of years to like, oh, before you started like doing all of these Okinawan things, researching Okinawa, like we didn't really know there was a difference. And my auntie also said that even like growing up, she didn't know until she had like her first or second job. And one of her coworkers were like, how come how did your grandma or how did your parents get together? Because her mom being Okinawan and her dad being Japanese. And my auntie didn't understand the question because she didn't know there was that kind of discrimination in the plantation era. And kind of, yeah. So it's interesting that I think that separation too, like my grandma being the youngest and being away from everyone as well, also kind of not fully erased, but like really masked a lot of the Okinawanness.
Did you talk to your grandma about, so your grandma, you said your grandma's
Japanese.
Japanese.
Yeah. My grandma's Okinawan, but she married my grandpa.
Who's
is
Japanese?
Japanese, yeah.
Did you ever get to talk to your grandma, I guess, about like, yeah, how did that happen? And did she experience any discrimination or I guess apprehension maybe from her family to marry a Japanese person?
You know, one story I remember hearing is that, so I've heard like my grandpa's side was like really strict traditional like Japanese. And again, on that side, I'm fifth generation, all on Kauai. But so the way my mom, my auntie and stuff would talk about their grandparents, so my great grandparents, they were very like, on my grandma's side, my grandma's mom was very jolly. She would laugh a lot. She had this big belly that would like bounce whenever she laughed. And then my Japanese side, they never laughed. They never smiled. They were really quiet. They were very proper. And this one story my grandma told, or that was told about my grandma, was that kind of her in-laws would never really talk to her, like at family gatherings and things. So my immediate interpretation of that was like, oh, they didn't like her because she was Okinawan. But that's not how my grandma kind of talked about it. She didn't think of it that way. So whether they were discriminating against her or not, I don't really know. But I know she said that they were not. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a big difference, I think, between the cultures too. Yeah, I mean, I think just the Okinawa as being an island people, I don't know, it's just that whole sociability and maybe openness, I guess, is different. Yeah, from the Japanese culture.
Yeah.
So, how did you get connected with that person from? You said Axels, right?
Yeah. You know, when I was in Okinawa, I just had like one contact family. So it was the family of one of the international students at Willamette. He was from Okinawa. So I wasn't staying with them, but they were kind of like my host family in Okinawa. They did a lot for me, connecting me with different people. I don't remember through what connection I ended up talking to this Axel's person, but it was very much like I just had that family. They introduced me to someone. That person introduced me to someone, kind of thing. I remember like having to walk to the payphone on the street to make cold calls to people in my really bad Japanese, just trying to set up interviews. This stranger from Hawaii calling and being like, "Hey, can I interview you? Can I talk to you about Okinawan stuff?" But yeah, I want to say it was through a college student. I think he was a college student. So I know I interviewed one college student while I was there, and I want to say it was through his connection, but I don't remember.
Yeah, because Axel's, I wasn't really familiar with them until maybe the last year or so. But yeah, they do a lot of work, with everything.
Yeah.
Perpetuating the culture and independence and all of that. So
I've learned a lot about them more recently. I think at the time I was just too overwhelmed with all the information I was getting that I kind of forgot about it until I started seeing them more recently on social media.
Yeah. Do you know anybody at Axel still?
I know Lex.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She's the one that like I see she's at the United Nations doing some speaking and stuff like that, right? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, because I saw on their social media, on their Instagram, that they had sent a group of people from Okinawa, and they met with some of the Maori people in New Zealand.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah. And we're gonna take a trip to New Zealand this Christmas break.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I really wanted to maybe if they have some connections, I wanted to talk to somebody too, about their history and their their reclamation of identity and things like that. Yeah, so that's on my agenda for our New Zealand trip.
Oh,
hopefully.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess you and I got connected through Susan from the Genealogy Society in Hawaii. Yeah, so maybe you can kind of tell us about, I guess, what does the Genealogy Society do, and how can people utilize their resources? Because, for me, I really don't know any of my relatives in Okinawa. I think maybe we might know one person, my grandpa's sister's husband, maybe something like that. But yeah, I don't know anybody else. I know somebody on the Miyashiro. That's the one person on the Miyashiro side that I know. But on my grandma's side, we don't know anybody on my grandma's side. So I think the next time I take a trip to Okinawa, I think it would be nice to maybe search some people out and see if I could talk with them and just get to meet them and see what they're about and get their stories and everything.
Yeah. So I'm just going to be super transparent. I am new to the Okinawan Genealogical Society of Hawaii. They did invite me to give a talk on oral history, I want to say last year. So that was kind of like one of my introductions to them when I went to give a presentation on oral history and how oral history could be a tool for genealogical research. I've since joined as a member, but I haven't really done much with them since. I know they offer assistance in going about genealogical research. Like if you don't know anything about your family history, then they have resources to get you started on that journey. They can also, I think they still help in getting, like the koseki, the family register. I haven't used their services. All of my kind of genealogy research was kind of on my own, especially because I do have that command of the Japanese language. But if you don't have that, then they're a great resource to go to. And they meet once a month.
Okay. So how did you go about it? How did you go about, I guess, tracking some of your relatives down, or did you know they were there?
I didn't know if I still had relatives in Okinawa until this January, I think. And it was this weird that I feel like it was my ancestors really guiding me to make this reconnection, because I've been involved with the Young Okinawans of Hawaii, drumming with them for the past couple years since it started back up after they stopped during COVID. But last year, I had an opportunity to go with them to the Rinzai-zen temple in Paia on Maui. And this was right after the fire in Lahaina. So a lot of other members dropped out, but that was the temple that I know my Okinawan side went to. So I wanted to go for them and see if I would find out more information or just kind of see the place and honor them in the place that they went to for that kind of more spiritual purpose. So when I was there, I ran into one of my uncles, one of my mom's first cousins on my grandma's side. And then I was asking him questions because his mom, my grandma's older sister, was the family genealogist. And she had passed away the year before, I think. So he was there because this was the first obon since COVID and he wanted to like honor his mom. So I was asking him about like the Higa connections to the temple. And he was like, I don't really know, but my second cousins might know. And so they're your relatives too. And takes me over. Turns out they're the aunties who were organizing it earlier that afternoon when we went with the Young Okinawans to like greet, like say hello. And I was like, oh, we're related. And then that was really cool. Like meeting relatives I didn't know I had on my Okinawan side. And then they mentioned that they had a bunch of old photos from my grandma's sister. And it was just sitting in their place. And they're like, oh, you do oral history work. Next time we'll give you the photos. So work brought me to Maui in January for this exhibit that was going on at the Maui Arts and Cultural Center about Maui, honoring Maui as a place and kind of like place of sense of place is what the exhibit was called. And they had a wall, like a community wall of photos that I was helping to put up. We had to drive out, I think, to Kihei to pick up the photos, but it was on this giant poster board. And I had to cut them all out by hand to put on the wall. And as I was about to stick one of the photos on the wall, I had to stop and I was like, that looks like my uncle, the one who introduced me to his second cousins, my relatives. And he was like in the background of the photo. I was like, oh, is this Rinzai Zen in the photo? And then there's like a pile of andagi at like by the altar. And then my grandma's older sister is like offering a prayer. I was like, wow, like my family is in this photo that's in this exhibit. And on that trip, I got to reconnect with that auntie that uncle in the photo introduced me to. She gave me the box of photos, also told me they were just in Okinawa last year and they met with our relatives. And I was like, oh, they're still alive. We still have relatives in Okinawa. Like, I didn't know that. And I got the contact info from them. So when I went to Okinawa this past June, I got to meet with them, and it's my grandma's first cousin in Okinawa who's still alive. I think he's in his 90s, but he's my grandma's father's nephew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you're right. There's so much synchronicity in your whole story about how it all just happened. It's definitely like, your ancestors helping you out, or some higher power. That's so interesting. So did you folks go to perform at the Bon Dance?
Yeah, so we drummed last year and then again this year at the Bon Dance. So
wow.
That was nice because it was like a mini family reunion for me because I saw the same uncle, saw the same aunties, saw some other aunties as well that I didn't see the year prior.
So who's playing on Maui? Who's playing at the Bon Dance? Are they playing Okinawan music?
Yeah, so that one is actually the only all Okinawan Bon Dance in all of Hawaii.
Oh.
Which I didn't know before, but it's just like Norman Shinshi and all these other, I guess, local players on Maui who Uchinānchu goes to like do lessons with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so nice. When you have the drums and you have the sanshin and the music. It's so special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another thing I feel bad about because we did a couple Bon dances a long time ago, but it just kind of died out, because our small Sanshin group over here, we haven't really practiced, and we just have to get that momentum going again, and the young Okinawans came down and they did the drumming and everything, and yeah, that whole vibe of everything is like so special. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel guilty about that too, especially when I saw Nora's performance, last night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I have a responsibility to keep this going, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like the jolt to bring it back.
I know. The thing is like, yeah, I've told Norman this also. It's just like the vibe of that event, is really something special. But like usually, I can't. I don't really like traditional Sanshin music, so much. Or Okinawan dance. So it's like it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to get into it. Unless you're with the group and just that whole sound and feeling is going. But yeah, it's just kind of difficult sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
So I guess talking about your oral history background, how do you think that's helped? I guess, like with your genealogy research, and how has that helped on I guess your personal journey?
Yeah. So kind of going back to you talking about going to Aotearoa, New Zealand, we just hosted a Maori oral historian named Nifē Mahuika this past March or April, I think. But he wrote this book called Rethinking Oral History and Tradition. And kind of his argument throughout the book is that for Indigenous populations, their oral traditions are their oral histories. And you can't really separate them like how they've been separated in, I guess, academia. So they're not separate fields anymore. So he might be someone interesting for you to talk to. But in his book, he also talks about how, like, the Maori carvers, their carvings are stories. Those are also oral histories for Maori people. The testimonies in the courts, those are oral histories. The kind of like all of these different, like, I guess they have different oratory kind of traditions as well. So he's talking about how all of these different things, including the chants and songs, everything is an oral history. Even these, like, those moments in the kitchen, maybe with like mom or grandma, whoever, and they're just telling you how to do something, or you just have to watch them and observe. That's also this learning moment that is an oral history. So thinking about that, with the oral history thing, I really broadened my idea of what an oral history can and should be, especially thinking about like Okinawans, Luchuans as Indigenous, and what kinds of practices would be counted as oral histories. So I think we could think of like Hajichi as oral histories, but also those stories, the really passing stories. It doesn't need to be like this formal sit-down interview that's an oral history. So I know on one of my trips to Maui with like my auntie, my grandma, her older sister who was flying in from Arizona, we were driving around, and then we were driving through Paia. We passed by the Rinzai-zen temple, and that's kind of how it got put in my head. This was maybe before the pandemic, I think. But I remember them talking about like the tsunami and having to move their parents' grave and how it got moved here to Oahu, but also how they used to have Higa clan gatherings, Rinzai-zen. And as they were talking, I just pulled out my phone and I recorded it, just like this maybe 3-5 minute conversation. And I'm glad I did that now, because my grandma has since passed away. So it's not only a recording of her voice, it's also this kind of like memory of this place that I don't have a connection to, but my grandma's generation and her parents, my great-grandparents, had a connection to that place. So that by doing this recording and keeping it and trying to use that information, which is how I ended up there last year with the young Okinawans, is kind of how I'm living that oral history, if that makes sense, and applying it to my everyday life in this kind of genealogical journey. Yeah,
that's great. So is that that interview that you did with the New Zealand author, is that on the UH website?
We did a talk story with him in 2021, I think. I can send you the link to that, where he's talking about his book, but we didn't interview him. He gave a lecture here on campus that we flew him over for. But yeah, I can send you all of that.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just looking through, I guess, the UH oral history site, and there's so many interesting things, so many oral histories on there for people to check out, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe you can give some background about, I guess, what people can look at and the types of stories that are there.
Yeah. So the Center for Oral History was started in 1976. I think to date we have maybe close to 900 interviews online, the transcripts, like, all available. And I think of particular interest are the Uchinānchu, a history of Okinawans in Hawaiʻi, oral histories that was done by the Center for Oral History with HUOA, I believe. And then there was another collection about Okinawan-owned restaurants, but specifically looking at Okinawans who came from Oroku, I think, in Naha. For some reason, there was like a really big percentage of people, especially Okinawans, who came from Oroku, who opened restaurants here in Hawaii. So there's also that oral history collection. And those are the two that specifically look at Okinawan experiences. Of course, there's Okinawan voices throughout a lot of them. A lot look at different plantation communities on all the islands. So you'll find Okinawans in them as well. But I think with the Uchinānchu collection, especially, that one's interesting because that's interviews that were done with the Ise. So you really get an idea of what the super early plantation experience was like. And those interviews were conducted primarily in Japanese. So what you're reading is a translation. Unfortunately, the audio recordings are not online, but if anyone is on Oahu, has time to stop by Hamilton Library, you can go to the Hawaiian and Pacific collections on the 5th floor and listen to them in person there. I remember I was listening to one of those interviews from the Ise, and it started with them playing sanshin and singing this song. And that is not represented at all in the transcript. And I was just so blown away at how kind of powerful that was in, like, framing everything and his story and experience. But yeah, that's a brief summary of our collections.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know that you folks existed, you know? And I think a lot of people maybe don't know. And it's such a resource. I mean, are you folks planning on doing, I guess, anything else in the Okinawan community?
Right now, we don't have any plans looking specifically at the Okinawan community, but we do have a ongoing project with, have you heard of Honouliuli, the internment camp here in Hawaii? It's on Oahu, kind of close to Kapolei, but it was like the lost internment incarceration camp. And there were a lot of prisoners of war from Korea, Taiwan, Okinawa, Japan, along with, like, the Japanese and Japanese American, like, internees. So that makes its history a little bit unique compared to a lot of the incarceration camps on the US continent, where those were not POW camps. But Honouliuli here was both a POW and an internment camp. And there's been some research that Honouliuli National Historic Site So they're with the National Park Service, but they, in 2018, I think, one of their employees went to Okinawa to interview some of the surviving Okinawan POWs who were at Honouliuli. And they were only there for a really short amount of time. But right now we're researching more into the POW experience. In one report, it said that there were more Korean POWs than any other group. But the more research we do, the more we're like not sure about those numbers. So our primary focus right now is on the Korean POWs, but we're hoping to expand to the other groups, and Okinawans would probably be next since they were also a really big group and there's been previous research done on them. And we're also doing a project on the Lahaina Jodo mission. We got a small grant to do that. I don't know what the Okinawan community was like in Lahaina, but there's potential overlap there as well. Yeah, those are some things that I can think of off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, I had never heard of that internment camp.
Mm-hmm.
So were there also a lot of Japanese in Okinawa, local Japanese and Okinawans that were interned there?
Yeah, primarily like other places. I think it was mostly men, but like community leaders, priests, school teachers. I think they were at Sand Island initially, but then because Sand Island is on the coastline, it could be seen as using prisoners as like a defense. So it violates those, like, I don't know if it's the Geneva Convention or whatever. So they had to build Honouliuli inland to keep the POWs. But yeah, the Japanese Cultural Center of Hawaii here on Oahu has a really great exhibit about Honouliuli. And yeah, hopefully they used to do tours there regularly, which kind of stopped during the pandemic. But hopefully they'll start bringing those back so more people can start accessing it again and learning about it.
Yeah, never heard. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wish, like you said about, how all these small events and conversations could be classified as an oral history. Yeah, now I really wish I had spent the time to record some of the conversations with my grandma and grandpa and, my great uncle and stuff like that, because they had so many stories about stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even an uncle in Honolulu, he would tell us all these stories,
Yeah.
Yeah, because they
write those down before you forget them.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was right at that age during World War II, where he enlisted in the military and was sent to Europe. And yeah, I think that's another topic, right? Because there's so many Okinawans that enlisted just to serve their country.
Yeah.
Yeah, there must. I mean, and those people. There's probably. I don't know if there's any people still alive, right, around that era.
Yeah, the very few left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those would be like so interesting stories. Just my uncle, he would tell me, because he was stationed in Italy. So during that time, I think he learned to speak a little bit Italian, and he got into like Italian opera.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So he would listen to Italian opera. He had all these records of Italian opera.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I just all those stories. Yeah. I wish I can still write it down. I guess I should probably write it down before I forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But just hearing it in his voice would be like so special.
Yeah.
But even my grandma and grandpa, I don't have very many Okinawan stories from them either, and we would participate in some Okinawan activities like those little, I guess, city picnics, So did you participate in those? No,
my family wasn't involved in anything.
In anything. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the extent of my involvement, is that we would go to like the Ginoza picnic at Kapiolani Park, and so they would have that every year. I think that was probably the only Okinawan thing that we did. But yeah, I mean, just recording all those picnics, that would have been like such a historic thing to do. I could show my kids,
Yeah, yeah.
So what's next on your Okinawan journey? You said you're doing the linguistics thing for the Taikai.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what is that going to focus on?
So I'm in the Department of Second Language Studies working on my PhD. It's slow going because I'm working here full time at the Center for Oral History. So I say my PhD is like my side project. But it's based on oral history interviews that I did with participants at the last Taikai. I also asked them to share photos with me, photos or videos of Taikai, because I wanted to understand how people who are attending Taikai kind of saw and interpreted or reflected on all of the different Uchinānchu from all around the world and like what languages they were bringing there, what cultures they were bringing there. So I analyzed over 200 photos that were shared with me, breaking it down by like what languages were in the photos, where the photos were taken, like were they in the main arena area, were they in kind of like the village visits, like the ancestral village visits. And Uchinaguchi was not very present anywhere really, which was really disappointing for me to see. But yeah, so I'm currently in the process of like writing all of this up, and hopefully I can get it published in a journal somewhere and then work on my dissertation after that. And I'm hoping my dissertation can kind of look at either continue this line of research into multilingual Okinawa through the diaspora, or look at what it means to do a return visit to the homeland and like what language resources are needed and stuff like that. But I'm not quite at that stage yet. I'm still thinking about what direction I want to go with my dissertation. But I am planning on returning to Okinawa in February, if possible. When I was there in June, I ordered a jifa for my hair.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I bought a fake one for like dancing, but I'm not a dancer, but I just wanted to kind of like bring it back by wearing it. And my hair is long now, so I can wear it. But I went to the silversmith, order a real one, and it takes about half a year to finish it. So I'm hoping I can go back, pick up the real one, and then start wearing that one.
What silversmith did you go to?
The one that it's in Shuri. I think they're one of the only places that still does it in the traditional method. I think it's Matayoshi.
Okay, yeah.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there was his daughter, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
is he doing it still, or is just his daughter doing it?
I think it's the daughter and the other apprentice right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to follow up on that. I really want to get one for my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So what about, you're saying Uchinaguchi wasn't really represented? What did you mean by that?
Oh, I meant it wasn't really present anywhere. And if it was present, it was maybe on the Taikai kind of like branding. So the only time you would see a word in Uchinaguchi is like when you see Sekai no Uchinānchu Taikai or Worldwide Uchinānchu Festival. So you would just see that one word like Uchinānchu, and it's like, okay, that's one example of seeing Okinawan language, but it's not really being used as like a language. The only real example I can think of is there was a photo of an exhibit that was going on in Kitanakagusuku, and it was photos from during the war or like immediately after the war. And I guess they were asking people if they recognized anything in the photos to like add notes or comments below the photo. So one of the people I interviewed took a photo of the very start of the exhibit where there was the instructions where it says to write everything out. So it was in Japanese, then it was in Uchinaguchi, and then it was in English. And then I interviewed everyone who submitted photos, And she was saying that it was really good for all of like the grandmas, the local grandmas who were visiting the exhibit. And I think it was made with them in mind, like providing them instructions in Uchinaguchi, like probably their first language, so that they knew what to do. But in other areas of Taikai, it wasn't really seen or heard. Someone else I talked to talked about how at every opportunity she would try and use Uchinaguchi with like all the uncles, aunties. And then this one uncle she talked to was like, "Oh, where did you learn Uchinaguchi? Like the young people here don't say it anymore, or like don't even use it anymore. They don't know how to use it." And then she said she just heard that so many times, and it was kind of disappointing because like Taikai especially is this opportunity. Like you're bringing Okinawans and Luchuans from all over the world back to Okinawa. So why aren't we using the native languages more and promoting them more? Yeah, that's what I meant.
Okay. So what is your, I guess, general impression, I guess, about the Taikai? I mean, I guess what do you think that they could, I mean, aside from the Uchinaguchi, what else do you think that the Taikai could be doing to, I guess, I don't know, I guess perpetuate the Okinawan culture, or perpetuate the Okinawa identity maybe a little bit more strongly?
Yeah. So again, based on my interviews, someone else I talked to, or maybe a few people I talked to actually, were kind of lamenting the fact that there wasn't really interaction with other groups. You were kind of stuck to your own kind of Kenjinkai, and you didn't really talk to anyone outside of that. And there were no opportunities created for kind of like that international exchange, getting to know people from other places. And sure, like language can be a barrier to that, like especially like a lot of the US folks probably don't speak Japanese too well. And then maybe some of them might know a little bit of Spanish, but like most of the Hawaiʻi folks probably don't know Spanish. And then speaking with the South American folks who speak Spanish, or then you have Brazil, which is Portuguese. And like, so how would you facilitate that kind of conversation? But one of them, he's a musician. He said he started playing Asadoya Yunta at one of the exhibit. I guess there was this display of different sanshin that had different awamori, I guess, logos as instead of snakeskin, it was awamori kind of sanshin. So he was playing one of them, and then someone else from another country was like, "Oh, is that Asadoya Yunta? I want to play too." And then there ended up being this group of people from all over the world, like really like worldwide Uchinānchu, playing together, united by this one song. They couldn't really communicate with each other, but they could play the same song together. That was an Okinawan song. And then it ended up being, I think in the Ryukyu Shimpo newspaper, the photo of them playing together. And the headline was like, united as one, like hearts united through the sanshin kind of thing. So I think fostering more of those kinds of opportunities where like you don't necessarily need language to connect with each other, but there's this like, I don't know, someone else I interviewed talked about this innate connection you have with other Uchinānchu. And she said it's like being with like one big family at Taikai. And I think having those kinds of like, whether it be music or maybe even like karate or kobudo would be good as well to get these different groups of people kind of interacting and kind of like a really low stakes kind of like, you don't feel pressure to have to speak with someone who doesn't speak the same language as you, but you can try. Yeah, I think that would probably help and be appreciated by some folks, I think.
I think that's a super idea. I think, just getting that collaboration and that community feeling, at the Taikai. But I think also just really making an effort to involve the local community, right? Mm-hmm. And having the local community be like heavily involved in that interaction. Yeah, I don't know who was telling me that they felt that the Taikai was kind of neglected the local community, and then, mostly celebrating the diaspora,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
when it should be the opposite, right? Actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. At least the people I talked to, it seemed like the more meaningful experiences for them were the ancestral village visit, but that's like only a day or a night kind of thing. But it was really at the local level where they really felt a lot more connected to people. So definitely, I do agree with needing to have the local community have a bigger role.
Yeah.
Especially since they're hosting everyone to.
Because I don't know if that's true or not either, but like, I don't know, like if how much space they allow to the local community, to come into that stadium, and really participate. I don't know. I don't know if the seats are mostly reserved for like the diaspora and, not as many seats for the local community.
I don't know what the ratio is there. I know they do reserve some seats for locals, but I don't know how much.
Yeah, there's so much work to do. I mean, when you look at, the Hawaiian community and how much work they've done just here in Hawaii, and then you look at Okinawa, it's like, wow, they have so much to do still, Yeah. But I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? Are you optimistic that Okinawa can get to the point where at least where Hawaii is,
I would so love to see that. But there's so many roadblocks in Okinawa that are not here or were not here in Hawaii. So I really do want to see that happen. It might be a very long road, and if it takes too long, then I fear a lot of the languages will be like really hard to bring back at that point. But it's really cool seeing a lot of younger Okinawan scholars or like Luchuan scholars coming up, getting PhDs, especially from Okinawa, and then going back to Okinawa to try and do that important work back home. So hopefully more and more people can start to do that and kind of like finding their own, I guess, kuleana, and then having those separate kuleanas kind of like they'll all overlap somewhere, and as a collective we can kind of push forward to achieve that kind of Renaissance type movement in Okinawa.
Yeah. Do you know Kotaro? Kotaro Yuki? Yeah. Yeah.
He's one of the guys I was thinking about when I was.
I know. He's like, Kotaro, you're our hope. You got to go back. You got to go back and start the Uchinaguchi immersion schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So hopefully he can go back at some point and do that. What other organizations in Okinawa do you know of that's, I guess, doing some of that work now? We talked about Axils, but who else? Yeah.
I think Hands-On.
Oh yeah,
Okinawa is one. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's another group. I don't know how much is like actual like revitalization work, but I did the JET program teaching in Japan, teaching English for 3 years out of college, and I was on the island of Tokunoshima, which is about 2 or 3 islands north of Okinawa, part of the northern Ryukyus, but part of Kagoshima Prefecture now. And while I was there, I got to go on a business trip to Okinawa to this, I think it's called Tao Factory, Tao Studio. It was like a contemporary dance kind of thing, and they work with local middle and high school students to put on like historic plays with like a modern twist with like dance and stuff. So we got to learn how to dance dynamic ryukyu from them in Okinawa. But this is a lot more like contemporary facing. So I don't know. We were consulting with them to put together what was called a Shimaguchi musical on Tokunoshima and on Tokunoshima, that's what they call the local language. They call it Shimaguchi. But when it was done, I was like, there was hardly any Shimaguchi in it, and it was mostly in Japanese. So, yeah, they're a potential third organization. But
yeah, I was just wondering because aside from Axels and Okinawa Hands-On, I wasn't really familiar of other groups in the motherland that's doing doing the work. Yeah, I mean, because it has to be in Okinawa. Yeah.
There's individuals though, like Fija Byron.
Oh.
And at Mayo University, there's Madoka Hamine, who's a applied linguist, and she's doing a lot of. She calls Yuntaku a form of like indigenous methodology to Okinawa, and she does a lot of language revitalization work through like a master apprentice program. So it's a lot smaller scale than like a school program.
What was her name again? You said
Madoka
Hamine.
Yeah, Hamine. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So, what else would you like to share? I guess once we get the show notes done for everything, I'll link to like your oral history site and the Oroku Hawaii restaurants and the Uchinānchu in Hawaii oral histories that you folks have done. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about in that vein or anything else?
Just to clarify oral history a little bit, the way I talked about oral history earlier is my own personal kind of indigenous framework for thinking about oral history in a specifically Luchuan, Okinawan kind of context. Oral history is this whole big field. It's not just like any kind, like you can take anything and call it oral history. It is this method of historical research. But that being said, I do think it's a valuable tool, especially in genealogy work or understanding the past, but also preserving culture and history through people's stories and lived experiences. And in that way, it's a lot more accessible than like a history textbook. But yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk story to Yuntaku like this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, well, if there's anything else, you think about or if you want to share, just, send me an email or, whatever. And yeah, we'll try and share this information with as many people as we can.
Yeah, sounds great.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it Mika or is it Micah?
It's Micah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, I didn't clarify that at the beginning. Okay, well, thank you, Micah. I really appreciate the call and the information. And yeah, hopefully, we can meet in person when I'm on Oahu visiting family or something.
Let me know.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks a lot again. And, let's keep in touch. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you loved today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate your support. Please consider making a small donation at donorbox.org/Luchu Nation. Your contribution helps us continue creating great content for you. Nifē, dēbiru.